Welcome into the Inside Scoop. We are live from Nashville, Tennessee. Today is Sunday, August 10th. My name, your host, it's Josh Newberg. We got a big show today. There's been some late summer moves, getting this recruiting thing going, heading into the fall. And also, today is my birthday. Let's get the HBDs going in the chat right now. Or you can guess how old I am. How old do you guys think I am this year in 2025? Let me know. I don't know if I want to do that or not. Maybe that's a bad idea. I don't know. But anyway, we have an absolutely loaded show. We're going to talk some Miami Hurricane recruiting. That week one visitor list is growing as Notre Dame comes to town. We're also going to talk Michigan recruiting. The Wolverines are closing in on a massive quarterback commitment. Yeah, things are heating up. But first, let's talk about some of the major developments that went down over the weekend. And I also got some NIL numbers to report. Those are always interesting to look at when those recruitments have ended. We get to see why. But let's start with Notre Dame. The Irish stay hot. Big commitment over the weekend. And this one was destined to go down the way that it did. The Fighting Irish beat out Alabama and Oklahoma to land Elijah Golden. That's why I said it was destined. With a name like Golden, how can you end up anywhere but Notre Dame when they've offered? So top 20 defensive lineman is Elijah Golden. Really highly coveted, but his recruitment, I mean, he's a top 20. I think he was ranked number 19 defensive lineman in the country. But I've said this on the show a couple times. It felt like his recruitment was more like a top 10 defensive lineman, not a top 20 defensive lineman. Just a ton of value at that position. And Elijah Golden at 6'3.5", 280 pounds is a great player. So what a summer it's been for the Irish. You know, we've had some big commitments already. Rodney Dunham, Joey O'Brien, Kerry Adams, Caden Finley, Javian Osborne. There's been so many this summer. But this commitment right here might have closed up shop for Notre Dame in the 2026 class. They are absolutely loaded right now. We've talked about the playmakers, right? We've talked about all the wide receivers, the running backs that Notre Dame is loaded up on. But that defensive line is tough. At edge, you got Ebenezer Ewatade, Tiki Hola in the middle, and now you add Elijah Golden to Notre Dame's number 4 ranked class in the country. Yes, they are exiting the summer. You know, a lot of times Notre Dame will enter the summer with a top 10 or a top 5 class, but that's not the way the summer always ends. But Notre Dame, on a high note, is exiting the summer with the number 4 ranked class in America. All right, Auburn, they made a massive jump over the weekend. After back-to-back top 10 classes under Hugh Freeze, it looked like they'd be right back there, right? But that's not how the summer went. 3 of Auburn's top-rated commitments flipped their commitments elsewhere this summer. Remember, Hugh Freeze was always known as the one that does the flipping, not the one that gets flipped on. But obviously, there's a wait-and-see mentality on the Plains when it comes to recruiting. They are just not giving him the pass, the hope, the excitement. It's worn off a little bit, not just with the recruits. Auburn fans probably feeling the same exact way about Hugh Freeze and this roster right now. But Auburn had the number 56 ranked class heading into last week. Now they've made that jump up to 37, and they're still moving forward. But what was the catalyst behind this? It was number 2 ranked wide receiver in the Rivals rankings, Jace Matthews. A huge pickup for Auburn going into the state of Mississippi, landing the number 2 ranked wide receiver in America. Now, I believe a lot of this had to do with Deuce Knight. Remember, last year, Deuce Knight was the number 1 ranked player in that state. Flipped from Notre Dame to Auburn. Huge pickup. He's on the roster now. He's looking great. Well, Jace Matthews is coming to join him on the plane. So, now, the theme moving forward for Auburn is going to be flip targets, because if this season goes the way, if it's a positive season, if Hugh Freeze can rack up some big wins, the recruits will follow. In those first 2 years, those top 10 classes, recruits were jumping in the boat left and right. But now, much like the fans, right? Much like the fans of Auburn, it's a wait-and-see mentality out there on the Plains. But we will see some potential flips if Auburn can win some games. And Sam Spiegelman, national analyst here at Rivals, had a couple notable names in the state of Texas that Auburn has some traction with. We'll start with number 6 athlete in the country, Caden Johnson. He made an early commitment to A&M, but the Tigers are buzzing there. Also, Ben Duncombe, a defensive lineman, 6'5", 250 pounds. He's from Austin, Texas, but somehow slips out of there and commits to Kentucky. Yeah, big old defensive lineman committed to Kentucky. Auburn's in on that one. Isaiah Broughton, another one. I mean, I guess this is just what happens when you have so much talent in the state of Texas. You can be a defensive lineman and go 6'4", 315 pounds and commit to UNLV. Yeah, Dan Mullen got a good one, at least for now. Auburn on the heels of this one. So the Tigers sitting at number 37 right now, but that all could change. Do you think Hugh Freeze has another top 10 class in him? Let me know, comment section below. All right, let's get to some of these reported NIL numbers. Now, this one's for edge Anthony Tank Jones after that Oregon commitment. Remember, we went live for it. It was about 10 days ago or so now. So he was considered a long-time lean. Remember, he's from the state of Alabama to the Crimson Tide. So he was leaning to the in-state team. It wasn't a ho-hum recruitment. I think Texas A&M was always in there. Oregon was definitely always in there. But as we got closer and closer to that commitment, the Ducks and Dan Lanning, they were surging, and they continued to push the right buttons because they landed him. Now, according to Steve Wiltfong's sources, what they're saying is that Tank is getting a deal with incentives and guaranteed money worth over $1 million for his first season in Eugene. Now, Oregon, Texas A&M, and Alabama were all kind of equal on that front. So if the money's equal, then it comes down to old school recruiting. And that's what it came down to for Tank Jones. He saw of course, the money's there. Let's not act like it's not, but it is there. And he decided that Oregon was still the best opportunity for him, and he could have gone to any school in the country. And, it made me think, money at Oregon isn't endless, right? How could it be? How could it be endless if they missed on quarterback Jared Curtis, if they missed on wide receiver Chris Henry, if they missed on offensive tackle Jackson Cantwell? You can't tell me that they have endless money if they don't land the targets that they really want. But I guess they also really wanted Tank Jones, and they landed him. All right, reported NIL package for 2027 edge LaDainian Guyton after Thursday's commitment to Texas Tech. Yes, Texas Tech landed the number one player in LaDainian Guyton for the 2027 class. Now, Pete Nakos, he had some sources on this one, and the number one recruit in the 27 class is expected to sign a multi-year deal that is going to make him one of the top paid edges in college football. But the 6'3", 240-pound Guyton is expected to make roughly $900,000 as a freshman. Now, this does not include any upfront cash or any incentives that he may have signed on to as well. So this is more of what his base quote-unquote salary will look like in 2027. Now, it's a 3-year deal, as Nakos is saying, and it has some escalators. It jumps in pay year over year, as it should. He's expected to make $1.2 million as a sophomore, $1.4 million as a junior. In total, the deal is expected to max out at $3.5 million, according to Nakos sources. So this is basically in line with what the market has paid the top pass rusher in the last couple of years. This is on pace to be about the same amount as Colin Simmons made at Texas, or what Dylan Stewart was making his freshman year at South Carolina. Big money being passed around to some of these guys. All right, let's take a look. Can we take a look at the top 10? Here it is as we are exiting summer. USC still at top. Georgia, Oregon, Notre Dame there at 4. Texas having an awesome summer. They're at 5. A&M, Alabama, LSU, Ohio State, and Miami. Miami is in there at 10. For much of the summer, they were outside the top 10, but they are now in there. You guys, talk to me. Who is your surprise of the summer? Who's your team of the summer? Let me know. Comment section below. Let's talk a little Miami Hurricanes recruiting, because Miami has a top 10 class as we head into the fall. And week 1 is really going to set the tone, at least when it comes to recruiting, because Notre Dame comes to town, and so do the top recruits. We're going to get into it. Got Steven Wagner here from Cane Sport. But, Steven, there's been 10 commits to Miami since Jackson Cantwell committed to the Canes in May. Maybe I'm off here, but why wasn't it a more explosive summer for the Canes on the trail? I mean, Derek Cooper going to Texas. You had Calvin Russell to Syracuse. Like, why did Miami not clean up after Jackson Cantwell?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And yeah, the word that you used there was explosive. In terms of the top end targets,
Right.
obviously, Derek Cooper was and still is the top running back on Miami's board. Calvin Russell, Miami legacy, absolutely mega priority. Losing out on those two guys, I think, did kind of change the way a lot of us in the media kind of like viewed Miami's summer. But by all means, I don't feel like this is a bad recruiting class by Miami to this point, or that they had a bad summer.
Right.
They still landed. I think right now their blue chip commit ratio is somewhere around the 70% mark. They were able to land really, really big time priority guys like Vance Spafford, or wide
Hmm.
receiver out of California that the Hurricanes absolutely love. Top 150 wide out in the country. They were still able to go out and get Shamori and Wingo, another four-star top 150 receiver here in the state of Florida. That was really important to Miami to continue adding talent on the perimeter. They also got a Rivals 300 outlier in Tyron Evans. That was another guy who was really important to Miami as they're trying to get bigger, more physical body types there out on the perimeter. They also got three-star defensive lineman Tyson Bacon, who right now he's only a three-star in the Rivals industry ranking, and I believe his player grade is somewhere around an 87, but he was an absolutely massive priority for the Hurricanes that they did have very, very high on their board. Not to mention Anthony Kennedy, the four-star run-stopping defensive tackle from Arkansas. He's another guy that Miami grew very, very high on this spring after Jason Taylor had the opportunity to get out to his school and see him. I really do think that this still is a pretty good class. I don't think that Miami,
I agree.
had a bad summer
Yeah.
by any means, but I think the reason that we're not talking about it more is because guys like Derek Cooper went to Texas, that guys like Calvin Russell went to Syracuse, Bryce Perry Wright went to Texas A&M, Lamar Brown went to LSU. These were guys that Miami was very, very
Yeah.
much in the mix for, and guys that were massive priorities for the Hurricanes that they missed out on the first time around. Now, that being said, each of the last two cycles, both in 24 and 25, since I've been here at CaneSport, Miami has found a way to get to flip some really big priority names down the stretch. Last year, it was flipping Joshua Moore. He ended up being a top 75 on 300 outlier. They flipped him successfully from Florida. They also ended up being able to flip edge Hayden Lowe from USC. He ended up being a 5-star. That was a really big recruiting win. In 2024, they flipped Jordan Lyle, the number one running back in the country from Ohio State, and they flipped Justin Scott from Ohio State too. Miami does have a good track record flipping guys in the fall, and I really do think that Miami is expecting to flip some more guys this year. I
Hmm.
absolutely believe the Hurricanes will add probably another three-ish, give or take one or
Yeah.
two players this fall. I think it's just a matter of seeing who the Hurricanes are going to get.
Yeah, and Miami fans, let me know. Am I being too critical? Because I agree with what you said. I mean, a top 10 class. How can you not like what Miami's done? But I think the key word there is more explosive summer. Like James JJ Johnson, another in-state must-have. If especially when the Canes are on top, right? They're dominating the in-state rivals, but they're still not able to keep teams like Georgia, Texas, and others from raiding the state. So we'll see. And in week one, they're going to get a chance to be in front of the rest of the country playing in prime time against Notre Dame. We know recruits are interested in this one. The big news coming out this week, Derek Cooper will be there for the Notre Dame game. That's a huge one. What's been going on between Derek Cooper and Miami since his commitment to Texas? Is there communication?
Yeah, absolutely nothing has changed in the way that Miami was pursuing Derek Cooper. He was the number one running back on their board before he committed to Texas. He's still the number one running back on their board. The Hurricanes really want to take two backs this cycle. They already have one in four-star running back Javian Mallory, and the other guy that they have absolutely set their sights on is Derek Cooper. Quite frankly, if Derek Cooper doesn't end up flipping to Miami, I'm not totally sure if Miami tries to go out and get another back to supplement and get a second running back basically just for the sake of getting a second running back. Because I think the way that Miami views it is there isn't really another running back on their board that's kind of like a Derek Cooper. Miami, they pretty much finished second for him whenever he committed to Texas. It was Texas and then kind of a toss up between Georgia and Miami after that. But Mario Cristobal has told Derek Cooper, we're still coming. They feel like they are very much in this mix, and I think the Hurricanes are absolutely in this mix too. And I think proof of that is the fact that Derek Cooper is going to visit Miami for the Hurricane season opener against Notre Dame in Week 1. He's not taking that visit if there isn't some level of interest on his side in the Hurricanes, and really leading up to his commitment to Texas. Until let's say probably like the 2 or 3 weeks prior to his announcement, we still felt like Miami was in the best position. We felt like the Hurricanes were kind of in the driver's seat. I had an RPM on Derek Cooper that I entered shortly after official visits that I felt very, very good about. In late June, we really thought Cooper was probably going to be a Hurricane. The majority of the buzz that I was hearing around Derek Cooper was in favor of Miami. Then obviously Texas comes in. He never took an official visit there. He took an unofficial visit there, but they swooped him up. They outright stole him. He does plan on getting down to Texas a couple of times. I had the chance to speak with his mother yesterday, and she said that they were looking at maybe getting down to Austin the weekend of September 20th, and then maybe even trying to get to the Cotton Bowl whenever Texas plays Oklahoma October 11th. But Miami is not going anywhere, and I think the fact that he's continuing to have these conversations and the fact that he also said he's willing to continue having these conversations until signing day tells me that the Hurricanes are absolutely in this race, and I expect the Hurricanes to be in this for the long haul. He's like we said, he's visiting for the season opener. I think I would actually be surprised if he doesn't make a second trip to Miami at some point later in the fall too.
Those visits to those games are going to be huge. All right. Any other names that you're tracking for this Week 1 visitor list? We're only about 3 weeks away.
Yeah, so a name that I have heard may end up visiting, this has not been confirmed yet, but a name that I could see potentially visiting is Nolan Wilson, the defensive lineman, currently committed to Alabama. Miami finished second for him. We kind of thought that was going to be a Miami-Alabama battle whenever he committed to the Hurricane, or whenever he committed to the Tide. I still think Miami is in that race. James Johnson has told me a few times he does want to get down to Miami at some point. To my knowledge, he has not yet firmly locked in that visit, but that is not going to surprise me at all. On the 2027 side, yesterday, I was able to confirm that number 2 overall prospect and 5-star offensive tackle Mark Matthews is going to be at Hard Rock Stadium for that game. He's going to be another really, really massive priority. I mean, a 5-star offensive lineman in South Florida at a pipeline school that the Hurricanes have historically had very, very strong ties to. That is obviously going to be a player that we are going to monitor incredibly closely, even though his own signing day is more than a year away. And he has told me he probably isn't going to make a decision until next summer, but still, that is a recruitment that the Hurricanes are going to be absolutely very, very invested in. We're obviously expecting a boatload of Miami's commits to get to town for that game. Would not surprise me at all if the Hurricanes are able to end up getting 1 or 2, maybe kind of like surprise names to campus for that game, just because historically speaking, for these massive Miami home recruiting weekends, whether it's Notre Dame this year, or Florida State last year, or Clemson the year before that, or someone along those lines. There always happen to be a couple of names that kind of pop up late and really surprise us. Some names that kind of show up just the week before that game is expected to take place. So we're going to keep our eyes open. But right now, those are kind of like the headliners that we're going to be tracking the closest. I guess it wouldn't really surprise me right now if four-star Florida State receiver commit Jason Lopez ended up making the trip to that game.
Yeah.
But as I said, that has not been confirmed yet, but I do expect to see him at a game at some point.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this list keeps growing and we see up to close to 50 elite targets for the 26 and 27 class joining this list. And I'm sure Kane Sports going to be your spot to keep track of all the week one visitors. And you guys let me know, Canes fans, are you going to be at the game week one? Let me know. Comment section below. Let's talk a little Michigan recruiting as we're 9 days out from a major five-star making a decision. And, I thought we were going to start this segment by talking Savion Hyder, but we're not, because Michigan is now trending for a major QB commitment. E.J. Holland with the Wolverine. What's the latest? Have you put your prediction in? I know I saw Steve Wiltfong dropped one.
Yeah, Steve called me that morning, and I was fresh off the plane from Mexico dealing with some scorpions that had snuck in our bag. But yeah, Steve called me that morning, gathered some intel. I came in with a prediction shortly after he did as well. We're feeling really good about Peter Bork, top 100 quarterback out of the New England area. We feel like he could make his decision here in the near future. So we're really anticipating a quick turnaround as opposed to maybe him dragging it out. Michigan really liked Malachi Ziegler out of Louisiana as well. But at the same time, I think Bork has always been the guy that's been at the top of the board. Chip Lindsey, Michigan's new offensive coordinator, went out and saw him in the spring, saw him throw live, brought him back in for the passing academy in June, had another evaluation there. Bork won co-quarterback MVP. And I just think Bork fits what Michigan wanted at the position, what Lindsey usually values. He's a taller pocket passer who is mobile in and around the pocket. I really liked what I saw from him at the Under Armour New Jersey camp this offseason. He's been my favorite quarterback on the board. I wrote that a ton over at the Wolverines. So Michigan is getting its guy. They have Brady Smeagol committed this class who can kind of be a bit of a bridge, but I think Bork brings a little bit more juice, a little bit more of an X factor. It wouldn't be surprising to see Bryce Underwood hand off the torch to Peter Bork in the future in Ann Arbor.
Really interesting. Why do you think he's such a good fit for Michigan?
Like I said, he fits what Chip Lindsey has historically looked for at the quarterback position. Lindsey does like those taller pocket passers who can move around, similar to Drake May. Obviously, at North Carolina, Lindsey had a lot of success having a more balanced offense. You had Amarion Hampton, who was gashing defenses. They were committed to the run game, but at the same time, you had Drake May, who turned into a first-round draft pick. So the big reason Michigan brought in Chip Lindsey was to add more balance to Michigan's offense. Michigan has always been known as a run-heavy team, but they want to throw the ball a little bit more. They invested a lot of money in Bryce Underwood. They're obviously picking things up, recruiting the quarterback position in general. And, while Peter Bork doesn't have maybe the hype that Bryce Underwood did, he's a really, really good quarterback. I think by the end of the cycle, you could be talking about Peter Bork as a top 50 prospect as opposed to, borderline top 100. So I think just the skill set he brings, just the mobility, the instincts. I mean, he has a high IQ. He's a high IQ kid. He's very polished at that Under Armour New Jersey camp. Every ball that came out of his hand was a spiral. I was talking to Chad Simmons. I was like, look at Bork. Every single ball. He's so clean. He's so crisp. He knows the game well. There's a lot to like about Peter Bork.
Yeah. All right. I just want to know why E.J. Holland, why he was your favorite, because I know you can be a little particular when it comes to the quarterback position, but that's interesting. All right. Let's get to it. Let's talk about Savion Hyder. We're 9 days out. Has anything changed on your end? How do you feel about where Michigan sits right now?
Yeah, that's still a tough one to kind of gauge. I feel like I can't share everything I know with Savion Hyder. He's keeping things very close to the vest, keeping things very private. Obviously, yeah. Savion's not a social media heavy kid. He will be announcing his commitment on August 19th. That has not changed. That's going to be the date. It will be streamed live. I can't give the platform yet. It will be streamed live. I think that right now it's still a tough battle between Michigan and Tennessee. That hasn't changed at all. I don't really see the other schools like Ohio State or Georgia really creeping in. It is going to come down to Michigan and Tennessee. He's continuing to talk to both coaching staffs. He's in regular communication with both. I'm not sure that Savion will even inform the coaching staffs. To be honest, he might just go up to that stage and announce it. The coaching staffs will find out with the rest of us. So, that's the type of recruitment this is. Savion really wants it to be his moment. I don't think he really wants the crystal balls or the guessing games or the intel out in the media. He's a 5-star guy, and normally you would want the publicity and the hype, but I think Savion isn't really like that, man. He's a small town kid who just wants to keep this really private, really family oriented. So we'll see. I think both Michigan and Tennessee have a lot of great things to offer. I do like where Michigan stands. If I had to make a prediction just on a whim and not necessarily based on intel, I'd probably lean Michigan, but this is very, very
All right. I figured you would lean a little Michigan. I'm leaning a little Michigan right now too, but let's talk about what is left. Now, I know everybody wants to turn the page to 2027. You guys at the Wolverine have a bunch of articles on 5-star recruits that Michigan is in on in 2027. But what's left in 2026? We know linebacker DQ Forkpa pushed his decision back to the fall. But who else is Michigan going to make a priority? And is Forkpa still a priority? I mean, we know things change. Things are fluid on the recruiting board. So is Forkpa still a priority?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Forkpa is going to be a priority. Michigan missed out on some of those linebacker targets here in the summer. You had Nick Abrams go to Georgia. You had Anthony Davis fly off the board. So, I mean, Michigan still needs a linebacker desperately in this class. And DQ Forkpa is at the very top of the board. They have a pre-existing relationship with his NIL agent, Cliff Hill, who also represented Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng last cycle. Michigan fans should remember that the Wolverines were able to win over Boateng, who pushed his decision back, much like Forkpa, was also an IMG kid, visited in the fall, and then signed with the Wolverines on National Signing Day, announced his commitment live on ESPN. So Forkpa could follow a similar path where he makes the fall visit to Michigan, makes fall visits elsewhere, and takes his decision all the way to signing day. But last time it worked out pretty well with the Owusu-Boateng. They're hoping it works out pretty well with Forkpa. If they don't feel as good about Forkpa, they have offered Liberty commit Caden Catchings. They feel like he's more of a under the radar gem type. They could look at adding another wide receiver. Obviously, Michigan came up a little short in the Calvin Russell sweepstakes, so we'll see. They're going to evaluate some senior film for potentially adding another offensive lineman. They missed out on Devon Benjamin, who committed to Oregon, so they could look at adding another corner. I've talked about Kari Adams quite a bit, who is committed to Notre Dame. I think he would be at the top of the board as far as a potential flip target for Michigan. So, not a ton of names out there for 26. The whole staff, they are all in on obviously getting the team prepared for the season, but Savion Hyder, man, it's an entire team effort from Jerome Moore to Tony Alford to other assistants to the collective. Right now, that's their full focus as we are 9 days away from that decision.
Yeah, and not to say that Savion Hyder is going to make or break this class, but if they are able to land him heading into the fall, it's just going to make this class look completely different. So we'll see what happens. I know there's going to be some flip targets down the road. I do not think that this is going to be it. So Michigan fans, talk to us. Who do you think is a priority this fall? I think there's some major moves left for Michigan. Talk to us, comment section below.